When you live to tick it before you kick it, it's pretty important that you power your adventure with the right nutrition. Not just when you decide to take on the biggest physical and mental challenge of your life, like I did retracing the 1928 Tour de France, but also as a part of everyday living. Working overtime on a double shift, running the kids all over town to their sporting events, adding a few extra miles to your weekly hike, or getting sleep deprived with a hectic travel schedule. I'm proud to announce BUCKiT Nutrition is now an official sponsor of our podcast, and just for you, giving a 10% discount on all BUCKiT nutritional products. Go to Amazon.com and use promo code BUCKiT10, that's BUCKiT with an IT, 10, for a 10% discount on BUCKiT nutritional products. Great tasting, high-performance nutrition to help you tick it before you kick it. The Spider Wrangler, yes, I said Spider Wrangler, has placed a large suitcase full of big, hairy male tarantulas all over the terrified actor who's playing opposite Harrison Ford. The cameras are rolling on the set of Indiana Jones' Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the dramatic cave scene is underway. But director Stephen Spielberg is not happy. The 8-legged extras are not moving as he thinks they should, and he thinks they look fake. So the Spider-Man comes to the rescue with a cunning plan. Release a female among them, and all hell will break loose. That's exactly what happened next, much to the horror of actor Alfred Molina.
I knew I couldn't go back.
You just put it out there.
She said you've got less than a year to live.
Just dug even deeper.
Luck is the residue of design.
Nobody else was doing it, so why couldn't I?
That was the turning point.
Welcome to the BUCKiT Podcast with Phil Keoghan. Every week I talk to mavericks, disruptors, and innovators. People who ditch the excuses, swerve off the predictable road, and epitomize what it means to tick it before you kick it.
I think all you can do is when jobs get offered you, you say yes. My only criteria was to stay employed.
Yeah.
And that I learned from my parents. That's very typical of immigrants all over the world. It still is. You work, and whatever comes up, you do it.
Alfred Molina is a well-known actor from the UK. He's appeared in more than 50 film, television, and stage productions, including his famous role in Indiana Jones' Raiders of the Lost Ark, Spider-Man 2, and the recent critically acclaimed independent film, St. Judy. Over the past 30 years, he's developed a reputation for an incredible ability to nail character-driven roles. He's able to transform himself into nearly every character imaginable. It doesn't seem to matter what nationality or accent. Alfred is game to try on anything for size. He's played a chronically unfaithful Mexican painter in Frida, a deranged drug dealer in Boogie Nights, as well as the comic book villain Doctor Octopus in Spider-Man 2. It's been said about this great character actor that he's great in just about everything, but he disappears so completely in the roles you forget where you've seen him before. There's something so familiar about his face and his voice that you just feel like you want to go up and say hi, like he's a friend. That's exactly how I felt when I met Alfred for the first time, and well, now it seems like we might be tea-drinking buddies forever. We're having a cup of tea because...
Yeah.
Yes, cheers, by the way.
Nice cup of tea.
Yeah, nice cup of tea. We're having a cup of tea because when we met each other first, officially, we were at a movie premiere, a movie that I want to talk to you about, and we got talking. And
we met unofficially at the remand home, I seem to remember.
Yes, unofficially. We got out of there. and then we started talking about accents and everything, and we started just riffing off each other. But I reminded you, I didn't remind you, I told you that the first time I met you unofficially was on the Sony lot, and you were Doctor Octopus, and you were doing a scene in the lab. And I saw you there, and of course we didn't disturb you or anything. You were doing your thing. But I remember there was this one scene, and you were having to do it a number of times, and it was quite just knowing what it's like to make things. It was such an insightful thing to see you do this one take over and over and over. And I don't think there was any dialogue. It was just you doing something.
There was a lot of stuff like that. A lot of that kind of pseudoscience, sort of hitting buttons and sort of waiting for.
And you look so ominous, but I remember thinking, God, this guy really does transform himself. You're like the consummate transforming actor. I mean, you just have evolved. I mean, of course, Dr. Octopus I mean, he really did transform on screen. But you've had a whole career of that, and then you've just taken on this new role in this film, in
St. Judy.
St. Judy, and what a powerful film, independent film about something that's very poignant right now, something that's in the zeitgeist with immigration.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a true story based on the life of, or the professional life of Judy Wood, who was an immigration lawyer, and she came to California, to Los Angeles, to start her own practice.
Yeah,
and realized very quickly that there was a huge demand for her work, for her services. There was a whole culture of people who needed help to navigate the legal sort of the legal obstacles when you're an immigrant in this country. And as you say, it is absolutely timely. I mean, we talk about the immigration crisis and so on, and that crisis really is happening. But it's people like Judy Wood who are, in a way, kind of shining lights in the darkness. Her work has been really phenomenal, and she continues to do it. And so when the idea of making a movie about her and about her work came up, it felt like a no-brainer, really, particularly because of the timing. This is a story that's happening now. I mean,
every day we're seeing something about this.
And every day we're seeing and hearing a new obscenity at the border. And it's really quite shocking. And the irony, of course, is that she's working in an area of law where one would hope there'd be less of a demand for her services.
Right.
But as it happens, the demand is becoming bigger and bigger.
And it's interesting, too, how quickly people have forgotten that we're all essentially immigrants, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a New Zealander, you're an Englishman.
Absolutely. But, the advantage we have is that we're white.
Yes.
And so we don't, we don't come under the same kind of scrutiny. Which I think is a shame because, it shows up a disparity in the system that isn't really fair. But there's a reason why everyone wants to come here.
Yeah.
And it is a land of opportunity, and it still is that great experiment, even though it's happened very much at the cost of people's liberty and people's freedom. But fundamentally it's still a country that welcomes people.
Yeah. Just the idea that we won't allow people to come, it speaks directly against why you and I came here, right? I mean, because it is a land of opportunity, but to sort of be selective about people and people coming here for the same reasons we came here, it's very sad. Yeah,
and that and all of that kind of gets touched on in the movie. Although the focus really is the work that Judy does on two specific cases, and they're cases that involve not just the right of someone to come to the States, but also definitions of what qualifies as a political asylum seeker. What qualifies as someone who's merely an economic migrant, and so on and so forth. And all of that is kind of for a country that is built by immigrants.
You said just the nature of deciding to step from your country to another country, looking for freedom, a chance to get educated, a chance to live a life that's not hampered by oppression. The very fact that that decision suddenly can become something that threatens your life. This is what is at the heart of the movie.
Did I really say that?
Yeah, and it's so eloquent.
I'm rather pleased with myself. That sounds rather intelligent. Are you sure that was me?
Yeah.
It sounds a bit too bright for me, but I totally concur.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that.
You agree with yourself.
I am agreeing with myself.
You absolutely agree with yourself. So the film, we saw it, we were lucky enough to see it in a theater, and it did a theatrical run. For people who want to see it, where can they go to see it? Well,
it'll be streaming. And I think also there's going to be very soon a DVD release. So it's going to be available, readily available.
Can you imagine when you first came to America, you'd ever be saying, "Well, my movie is going to be streaming"?
I know.
I know. What the hell?
I'm still learning. There's a whole new language I'm still learning. I've got grandchildren in their teens, in their mid-teens.
You don't look
like that. Well, you're very kind.
Yeah.
I don't understand them half the time. When they're talking about, because what's available to them,
yes,
in terms of education, distraction, entertainment, diversion, all the things that they've got in their lives to kind of keep them occupied. So much of it is so tied into the internet and social media and so on. There's a whole language that has evolved, not necessarily.
But this is why
it's really hard to keep up.
I've heard people speak about the idea that, when we were young, there was this idea that you could actually get bored, right? That you could actually stop to a point where you'd be thinking, well, what am I going to do? Yeah. Now there's no such thing.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, when I used to say things like, I'm bored.
Right.
I remember my mother saying things like,
get outside?
No, she'd say things like, only boring people get bored.
I'm not bored, really.
But it was, but I was the kind of classic, latchkey kid. I mean, both my parents worked. So, I had my door key around my neck on a chain, and I was, I'd come home, I'd let myself in, I'd make myself some
very independent.
But we had to. But also, it wasn't. I don't remember either being praised for it or being chastised for it.
It was just what you had to do,
or having to learn how to do it. It was just something you did.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of,
it's part of life.
It was like, come home, do your homework, make yourself a sandwich, and wait till I get there.
Right. And your parents, one of the things that I've loved about you talking about your background is you've totally owned it. I mean, you talk proudly about your background. You're an immigrant. Your parents both came to England as immigrants.
Yeah, my father was Spanish. My mother was Italian. My dad was a refugee from the Spanish Civil War, and he arrived in England via the refugee trail through France. And he arrived in the UK just in time for the outbreak of World War II. He couldn't go back to Spain, so he, along with a lot of other men from all over Europe who were disenfranchised and dispossessed, most of them running away from fascism, from Germany and Italy and Spain. And they formed what was under the auspices of the British Army was the Pioneer Corps. And the Pioneer Corps was basically servicemen who didn't have English as a first language. So they were trained they were trained as radio operators, they were trained as navigators and so on, stuff that they could do without language, stuff they could see. And my dad very proudly, but they weren't frontline troops, my dad very proudly used to say things like, yes, I was on the beach at D-Day. I was there. Oh yes. And he was. But what he would often forget to mention was that he arrived like a couple of days afterwards, because the Pioneer Corps, they were the guys cleaning up all the shit.
Oh my God!
All the dead bodies on the thing. They were cleaning up all the garbage. All the just
stuff that was left behind.
Yeah, sort of ordnance and I guess burying dead soldiers and all that, and it was But he went through that, so he had something like 10 years of being basically at war. And my mother arrived in England from Italy in 1948, and she got a job in a restaurant. She got a job in a hotel cleaning rooms. She was a chambermaid. And my dad, at that time, was working as a waiter in the hotel restaurant.
Downstairs.
And that's how they met. That's where they met.
Well, and you slip into accents so quickly, I presume. Growing up with parents with different accents, you are known.
I just kind of had. Well, I think I just had an ear for it somehow. I mean, and it wasn't anything that I'd practiced or trained for. It was just, I think I was just lucky.
You just soaked it up.
Yeah, I guess. And I also grew up in a neighborhood in London that was nothing but sons and daughters of immigrant families. We had Caribbean families, Irish, Italian, Portuguese, and there was a huge mix of lots, and it was a big sort of immigrant neighborhood. See, both my parents, they finished their education around about the age of 15, 16, and
so many working class people of that era.
But they both had a real innate skill for language. Both of them could read, write, and speak fluently in each other's language and in French and English. I learned Spanish and Italian from them, but I never learned French because French was the language they would translate everything in Spanish or Italian, but they wouldn't translate the French because we lived in 2 rooms, and I think they needed the French for privacy, so they never taught me.
That was their private language.
Yeah, they never taught me French.
Well, they do say that French is the language of love too, right?
Yeah, but the Italians say that about Italian.
Yeah, that's true.
And the Spanish say that about Spanish.
Yeah.
They're all wrong.
Yeah, they're all. What is the language of love?
English as it's spoken in New Zealand. Where they have a lot of sucks.
Yeah, sucks.
They have a lot of sucks.
You mentioned in your neighborhood when you were a kid, you were exposed to all these different accents.
And not only that, but not just the accents of the parents of friends,
right,
and schoolmates, but also the amount of American TV that was on in those days. The Dick Van Dyke Show and
Mary Tyler Moore.
Mary Tyler Moore. We got all the big Western shows. Yeah. So we learned. We were kind of constantly soaking up these accents. I remember playing in the street, and we'd do it with American accents, because we were kind of mimicking what we'd seen on TV. You know, you got me, copper, head him off at the pass. You know, all that kind of stuff. You know, there's a new sheriff in town. All that, you know, and there's all kind of stuff that we got off the television.
But you just soaked it all up, and who knew then, or maybe you did know, that you were going to do something with all of that?
Well, maybe it was all feeding some unrecognized. I don't know. I mean, it's fun to speculate, but I certainly the idea of becoming an actor. Well, I'm not sure exactly when it first manifested, but I do remember. This is why I think I give the story credence. I do remember going to the pictures with some mates.
Going to the pictures, which is such an English thing to say.
And so we'd all chip in for one ticket, and the one kid would buy a ticket, go in, and then we'd all sneak round the back, and he would open a side door, and we'd sneak in.
And then just rotate.
And just rotate it. We'd all chip, like say one ticket was like 9p. We'd all chip in a couple of p, and and make it up, and then somebody buy. And then we didn't always get away with it, but sometimes we did.
Were you like the class clown?
Yeah, very much so. And I was very gangly. I mean, I'm 6'3".
Yeah, I was going to say you were gangly, but
I was 6 foot and skinny by the time I was 13, 14.
Right.
So I was head and shoulders above my schoolmates. So I got a lot of tease. I got teased a lot for that. Got bullied a little bit for that.
Sky Tower and all that sort of
all that, yeah, and sort of people jumping up to kind of punch me in the face and all that. Just schoolboy stuff. But as a defense, as a kind of great way of getting out of that, was always to be funny, to kind of make jokes and do
accents.
Accents. I would go off on these little riffs, as if I was my mum or as if I was my dad. I'd go off on these riffs and I'd start making jokes, or I'd say things. I used to kind of do impersonations of all our teachers, stuff like that. But I don't think I was becoming an actor. I think what I was a tremendous show off. I think I was just a great show off. I just loved doing it. I loved showing off, and to the point where years later, one of the most important people in my life was a man called Martin Corbett, who was my English master at school. And he was the first person in my life who took me seriously when I said,
"You want to be an actor?
I really want to be an actor." And he gave me a lot of help. He gave me lists of books to read, plays to read, movies to see. He was very, very influential and helpful. But he did say at one point, he said, "Look, I'll help you, but the minute you drop the ball, the minute I don't see you being serious about this, I'm washing my hands of you," which was kind of a bit of a shock when you're like, 12 years old. But he meant it, and we stayed friends and until he passed away. But he lived long enough to see me do my first big leading role on Broadway, and he came to Broadway to see the play, and he just happened to be there the same night that I had another friend, also from the UK, in the audience. So the three of us went to dinner after the show, and I was, keen to know what he thought, and he was saying how much he enjoyed it, and he was, he said, "I love you. You were marvelous. I loved you." He was very, very sweet. And my friend Andy said, "So, Martin, was Fred a good actor when he was at school?" And without missing a beat, Martin went, "Oh no, he was dreadful, dreadful. But he was a terrific show-off." So I thought, yeah.
How cool that you remembered him and that he was able to experience that as a master.
That meant a lot to me, and it meant a lot to me that he got to see some of that.
I love this quote you said about your career. You said, "I've always looked for something that is different and diametrically opposed to what I did the last time." So you're always trying to find that different.
Yeah.
You're not looking for the remake, so to speak. I try to make each job as different as I can from the last one. And that's really your only criteria.
Yeah.
And you pay a price for that in certain ways, because that level of variety tends to mean that you're always a second or third lead. And when I mentioned to people that I was interviewing you, everybody connected with the name, and then they went, and you could see their brains going, and then they realized, oh my God, they're different roles. I mean, the diversity in the roles, the accents that I'm not sure if there's an actor who's spoken more accents on film than you.
There used to be this joke, years ago when people used to talk about the accents. I used to say, "Yeah, I give good foreign," And I've done a whole range of accents. Some of them have come naturally. Others I've had to work on.
Give us some or tell us about the ones that came easily, and then some that you've had to really work on.
Well, I think the ones that came, whenever I've played Italian or Spanish characters, that came easily, because basically I was doing variations on my mother or my dad. I did a movie where I had to have a Russian accent.
Yes.
Now, I can do a kind of pretty basic, generalized Russian accent. You can kind of go, but it wouldn't tell you anything about what part of Russia or whatever. So I had to do a little bit of work on that. I did some work, various things like that. Accent work on. I played an Afghan warlord in a movie a few years ago. I had to do some work on that. So there's all. It's not like it's a thing that just. It's not like a bag I can just open.
You've got to own it.
You've got to own it. And you've got to kind of do some work. And also, it's important to be as. I think it's just disrespectful,
right?
If you're not as accurate as accurate as you can be.
Yeah, because we've seen some pretty shocking accents on film from. We don't need to mention the actors, but you can tell when somebody really just hasn't gone there, and it is disrespectful.
Yeah,
right?
and I've always, because I remember once being asked about. I remember saying to I think I was doing. I can't remember what the job was now, but I remember the moment, and I asked one of the other actors. I said, does the accent sound okay? And he said, "Yeah, no one's going to notice."
No one's going to notice.
And I said, well, I'll notice.
Yeah.
I said, because if someone was doing my accent with that kind of lazy attitude, I'd be pissed off.
Yeah. And
also, it's important to be honest about what you can't do. The New Zealand accent's a perfect example. I went to work in New Zealand years ago on a series, and the first thing I said to the producers, I said, can this character be British or American? It was written as a New Zealander. I said, because I really can't do that accent. I've tried. It's really, really hard for me, and I don't want it to suddenly become that it's all about the performance is all about the accent.
Right.
And he was very cool. He said, "Yeah, you can play it British. That's no problem." So that's what we did. And I think it's important as well to be honest about that kind of thing, because you're creating a character that is basically carrying a whole culture in a sense, and you don't want to be, it's just important.
It's misrepresenting.
Yeah, it's important to be authentic. But the thing is, accent work, you can work on it. You can train, you can practice. I'll find people who have that accent and maybe get them to read my dialogue and record it, just to kind of get a sense of, because also what's involved as well isn't so much the sound you make, but it's also the rhythm of the accent.
Yeah.
There are little, where the stresses are.
Yeah. The little nuances in between.
Yeah, and those change. I mean, I did I was working with an actor who his character mentions that he comes from Piedmont, northern Italy. And I said, well, and he said,
you have a connection there.
Yeah, and I said, well, so he was talking about it, and I told him this story about how in Turin, when the Turinese, when they're talking in their dialect, there's a sound which they make, which is ne, which is like it's a word, but it's used as a kind of punctuation. So when somebody would say goodbye, they'd say ciao ne.
I see.
Right, and I mentioned this, and he went, oh, I'll use that. And he used it, and it just kind of gave him that little bit of authenticity to it. There's kind of, the sort of, so that sort of thing is kind of useful.
Some of the roles, some of the parts that you've played, I wanted to talk about some of those just because I know people they're looking at you, they're hearing your voice, and they're thinking, I know him from this movie I know. And so I just wanted to mention a few of them. The unfaithful Mexican painter Diego Rivera from Frida, a close-minded, fretful French mayor in Chocolat, the deranged drug dealer in Boogie Nights. Oh my God. You mentioned before, the film Not Without My Daughter. And then the Cuban immigrant family that had to find its way in Florida, of course, and then the Greek-American attorney in Before and After. So you mentioned that you're always looking for something new and different. How do these roles come to you? Do you go looking? I've been, touch wood. I've been very fortunate that roles have been offered. I've auditioned. I've done my fair share of auditioning, interviewing, obviously, and like for Spider-Man 2, I had to do a screen test. In fact, we all did. I mean, all the 4 actors that were being considered for that part were all actors who'd had a bit of a splash the year before. I think it was me, Chris Cooper, I think maybe Chris Walken, and one other actor. Actors.
We were all kind of like in the mix, and so and that's par for the course. There's no.
Do you get nervous?
I used to when I was much younger, but now I've come to terms with the fact that this is what you get. You either. The casting director or the director either wants this
or he doesn't,
or something else,
or they don't. Yeah.
And so now, I mean, when I was younger, I would slavishly lose weight, put on weight. They say, "Oh, we love you. We think you're fantastic. Could you lose 25 pounds?" I go, "Yeah, okay."
This was me 25 pounds ago.
Yeah, but I don't do that now. I mean, the last time somebody asked me, they said, "We'd love you for this part, but could you lose 20 pounds?" And I said, no, I think you probably need a thinner actor.
Yes. Just go find him.
I'm too old. Someone said, "Oh, that's confident," and someone else said, "That's just fucking lazy."
What would you?
It's a bit of both, I think.
What would you have said to your younger self when you first came up, when you got that break in Indiana Jones? What would you have?
What, from now?
Yeah, like if you were going to talk
the older
to him,
self.
Yeah, what would you say to you?
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Really?
Yeah. I think all you can do is when jobs get offered you say yes.
Yeah.
And that's all I did. My only criteria was, and I think I've said this before in interviews, my only criteria was to stay employed.
Yeah.
And that I learned from my parents. That's definitely.
You like to work.
The legacy, yeah, because my parents worked. My parents worked 6-7 days a week. They worked. They lived paycheck to paycheck. That was their life. They worked, and that's very typical of immigrants all over the world. It still is. You work, and whatever comes up, you do it. And that was, I remember I think we were saying this off camera earlier on. My dad would, he'd be talking to someone and he'd say, "So what do you do?" And you'd say, "Well, I do this." How much money are you making it? And he wasn't being rude.
Right.
He wasn't like being.
It was like, what are you getting for your
what
work?
is that work worth? And it was never a judgment on someone else. He was just, And I remember years later, I had a job. I think I'd been out of college about a year. I'd done a couple of jobs here and there, nothing much. And my dad got me a gig at the restaurant where he was working. He was the bartender by this point, and he got me a job as a waiter in this restaurant. And at one point, the manager of the restaurant offered me a chance to go on a 2-week paid course to train as an assistant manager. Now, if your ambition was to be in the restaurant business, that would have been a great opportunity. You'd be stupid to turn that down. But I turned it down because I didn't want to be a waiter. I didn't want to be an assistant manager. I was an actor. So I turned it down. My father found out about it because the managers told him. And I turned it down because I'd just been offered a gig to do a tour of a children's play. And they were going to pay me what was then the union basic, which in those days was something like £17 a week. So my father corners me one night after I'd finished my shift, and he says, "So this acting job, how much they pay you?" I said, "Well, it's union basic. It's 17 a week." "How much are you making here?" And I said, "Well, with tips, about 35, 40. And he looked at me. I've never forgotten it.
Wow.
You can't that look that you save for the lost and the mad.
Yeah.
That mix of a little bit of disdain and a lot of despair, a lot of kind of like, I can't understand you. I don't. He couldn't. Sorry, I'm getting a bit.
No, because I
verklempt about it, but he just couldn't understand it. He couldn't understand it, and it was one of the few times when I really saw that he just didn't get it. He didn't, and it wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault.
Well, it was because of his upbringing,
yeah,
where
of
he
course,
was from,
of course, and all the shit.
And he wanted the best for you. That was why he was
all the crap,
reacting.
all the crap he went through.
He was wanting the better life for you, and he felt like he wanted you.
I think he felt that me doing that was somehow him failing in some way.
He was living through.
Yeah, and so he always had. I apologize for getting
I don't think you should
upset.
apologize. I think it's wonderful that you remember that moment and that you remember him that way, and it says a lot about how much you respected his work ethic.
I did. I still do, and it was, but it was just very, But he then saw some stuff. But I got to tell you one other story about my dad to mitigate anything. He came to see me do a play where I had to drag up in the second half of the play. It was a play about a gang of, bank robbers. And my job in the gang was to create a diversion. So I dress up as a woman to look like a hooker on the street. So we did.
I'm trying to imagine your dad thinking.
Well, we did the full thing. I had the makeup and the dress and the hair. And my dad came to see the show, and afterwards he said, "Alfredo, it was incredible. When you dress up as a woman, you look just like your mother."
That's a compliment.
But the best bit was, that made me laugh. So as a joke, I said something like, "Did you think I look sexy?" And then he goes, "Don't be ridiculous."
That work ethic. It's amazing how, the things you learn from your parents, how they stick with you.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes if you slack off, you hear them in the back of your head.
Well, I still do it, and I don't know if I should admit to this, but every time I get a job and I'm told what the fee will be,
yes,
I work out how much that is per week.
Yeah. Yep.
I still think in terms of a weekly wage.
Yeah.
And I kind of go, well, I'm getting that much for 3 weeks' work. That's not bad. That's not bad. I don't think in terms of, well, it might be the only job I'll do for the next 6 months, or
Which
it might,
says-
this is the only job I'm going to do between now and Christmas, or whatever it is. I don't think in those I don't think long term. I just
Right.
kind of go, wow, so and so for 3. That's great.
That's pretty good. Better than that waiting job. Better than the standard acting wage I was getting.
But my dad saw when I did a movie for Stephen Frears called Prick Up Your Ears.
Yeah.
It was like my first proper lead in a movie, mid-80s. And the film was chosen to be the inaugural movie for the Barcelona Film Festival that year.
Huge honor, yeah.
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. So it was a huge. We all flew to Barcelona. We were there for like 3 days. It was great. We had a fantastic time. And my father was being interviewed by some local TV station, you know, asking about
you.
Yeah, how you felt when your son's in this movie. Yeah. And he's playing a gay murderer, you know, and all this, you know, so it was all, it was a bit of the movie. You know, it's hard to imagine now, but the movie back in the mid '80s was a bit of a envelope pusher, you know. And that was the time that's when my dad, you know, we finally got together at the one point, and you know, and we were having a drink, and we were sitting at a table on just the two of us, and he said, "So, now I suppose now you can buy me that Jaguar." That's what.
Were you ever able to buy him a car?
Nah. Never quite made enough money to buy him a Jaguar.
Do you also believe in this whole idea of clocking up the hours? Like,
yeah, I'm a
know,
great believer. Yeah, the whole 10,000 hours stuff. Yeah, I totally believe that. I totally believe that.
Think of the hours that you've spent performing in your career.
Yeah, and I don't. And that fills me with pride. You know, I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
I'm not.
You like hard work. I mean, you're not scared of it.
Not at all. Not at all.
Were you scared of the spiders though when you?
I was a little bit.
Can you tell me
nervous.
that story? Because wasn't there a story where you were walking into the?
Well,
set
it starts off at the audition. I went to audition for Raiders. I met Stephen Spielberg. I was very nervous.
Well, who wouldn't be?
We got on very well. You know, he was sort of saying how, you know, this might work out. I'm looking forward to it. You know, great. You'll be hearing from us. You know, shaking hands all round. You know, it was all very, very nice. As I'm leaving the suite where he was conducting all his interviews, as I get to the door, he says, "Oh, Alfred, forgot to ask. You don't have a thing about spiders, right?" And I went, "No." And I thought he meant those little daddy long legs, those things that crawl up out of the bath in the summer. You know, the little spiders.
Which are most of the spiders that we see.
Yeah. And I just kind of went, "No."
Yeah.
And then a week later, I get the call that I've got the job, so I got to go have the plaster cast made of my thing, and then someone says, "Have you met?" I can't remember exactly the sequence now, but someone said, "Have you met the spider guy?" And I went, "No." "Oh, you will. Don't worry, you'll meet." So on my first day, the scene with the spiders,
yes,
that was my first day. That we shot that on my first day. That was
this
my
the first time
shot.
film had rolled on you?
Yeah. So I arrive at the studio, and they're doing something else, and I'm in costume. I'm ready, and I see this guy walking down the corridor carrying 2 suitcases that are made out of perspex, you know, see-through, and each suitcase has these little about 8 compartments in each suitcase, and each compartment, because you could see right through it, each compartment had a little tuft of straw. You know, I didn't think twice about it. You know, morning. You know, he walks past. So I then get on set. We're doing the spider shot now, the spider scene now, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's talking, everyone's buzzing. I'm kind of like, you know, kind of excited, you know, not really think. And then I see that guy with the spider, with the suitcase. And then he undoes one of the suitcases and takes out this little compartment, takes off the straw, and there's this great big tarantula in this thing. And I suddenly went, those are they meant those spiders. And so then I'm in position, and he starts putting them on me. one by one, and they're completely still. They're not moving around. They're just completely still. And I'm just sitting there, like standing there. And eventually, the shot is basically me just reacting to the spiders, and I'm supposed to go like this, looking like I'm scared. So I start acting, and Stephen goes, "They're not moving. They look fake. They're not moving." So the camera guy's got his little air thing, what are they called?
Yeah,
those?
The dust off.
Little duster, yeah. And he's like squirting these, and all they're doing is they're not moving, they're just falling off.
He's blowing the spiders
trying to
off.
make them move. And so the guy, the wrangler,
the spider wrangler,
the spider guy says, "Well, they'll only move if I put a female amongst them. They'll start to move." So he goes to the other suitcase and pulls out, He then puts this other spider there, and they go fucking apeshit. They're like running all up the face, on the back, like this. And I'm, roll it. And Stephen's going, "Look scared, Alfred. Look scared." I'm not fucking scared. I'm scared. And one of them even crawled up here and kind of like, and never forgotten it.
But yet you called that a gift from God.
Yeah.
You said that whole experience.
I'll tell you why, Phil. I'll tell you why that was a gift from God. I'll tell you why. I was working in the theatre, earning, I don't know, next to nothing.
Well, at one point, 17 pounds a week.
My then partner was pregnant with our daughter.
Oh.
We were broke. And that movie, I was earning like 80 quid, this is like early 1980. I was earning maybe about £40 a week in the theatre, which was, not great money, but it was doable.
Not much more than you were earning as a waiter, by the way,
Yeah,
with the tips.
exactly. And also my partner was working. She worked almost right up until, she delivered. That movie paid me £1,000 a week for 2 weeks. It was like, that was a gift from God.
And whenever you see Stephen, I understand you always say, by the way, man.
Yeah, I've thanked him privately, I've thanked him publicly, and I always thank him for that, because it changed my life. It changed my life. He gave me my career in film. He gave me the best calling card any young actor could have.
And how old were you again?
25, 26. I'd walk into interviews and they'd say, "So what film experience have you had?" Well, I've just done Raiders of the Lost Ark. And
I was working with Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of, it started the conversation.
Yeah.
It didn't always, I'm not saying that it landed me the job every time, but it got the conversation going. So I've always, and also it meant that we were able to have our daughter in a modicum of comfort.
Oh, I love that.
And that's he saved my bacon. He really did.
You say to anybody, "Remember that scene? Throw me the idol," and and people just immediately they remember.
Yeah, and I've never had a problem with that. People come up to me still, and men my age, say they saw the film when they were young. They've shown it to their kids. They're now showing it to their grandkids. And I've got no problem with that.
So I mentioned the film St. Judy that you were recently in. And there's some other projects that you're working on right now that sound really interesting. Working with some great people, including Hugh Jackman. You did a film with Hugh Jackman.
That was last year. We did a movie called Front Runner.
Yeah.
That Hugh played the lead in. He was wonderful. And that was a lovely. That was the. I got the chance to work with some very, very good directors and actors over the last 2 or 3 years. My passion's in storytelling and and great stories, and we're setting up the same production company, Cannonball, that did St. Judy. I've done 3 movies with them. I've been executive produced on 2 of them, and this 4th project is called Lillian. It's a film that I'm going to direct.
This is your first directing job?
Yeah, first.
How do you feel about that?
I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I think I'm going to need some help on the technical side. In my experience, the best collaborations have always been with directors who trust the actor and trust that the actor will bring his or her best to the table. And that will always happen if the actor's given the room to do that. The best directors I've ever worked with are the ones who have started off the conversation by saying, how do you like to do this? You know, do you like lots of notes? Do you like few notes? Do you like lots of takes, or do you like no takes? Here are our parameters. We can give you maybe 2-3 takes tops. We just don't have the time for that. Can you work with that? You know, as soon as the director sets up a collaborative atmosphere, an atmosphere where you feel that your opinion and your input can be of some use, or at least will be taken seriously, or where you feel safe in being you, in giving that input, then I think you've got a recipe for, you know, a good, happy working environment.
What about your, you in your career, you've played so many different characters, and you've really embraced the idea of just taking on anything new and different. You ever thought about being like the lead romantic role on a film?
I think I've left it a bit late for that.
Well,
I think I'm 66. I don't.
But
think
you're like a
many
maturing wine.
Am I? Oh,
yes,
that's very
yes,
kind of you.
I
haven't not quite turned to vinegar yet.
Yes.
No, I think there's a certain you've got to be sensible as you get older in as an actor. You've got to be sensible about what's going to be available to you.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm not waiting for someone to kind of to send me some fabulous romantic comedy.
But is it something that you want, because you've really seemed to have embraced the idea that this is where you're best suited. You're best suited at transforming yourself. And
I'm a character actor.
Yeah,
that's what I am. I'm a character actor. You know, I play the second or third lead, and that's fine with me, because with that comes a freedom.
Yes.
And a range of roles that you can play. You can be a bad guy, you can be the funny guy, you can be the silly guy, you can be the grumpy neighbor, you can be the sweet granddad. Whatever it is, you can play a whole range of roles, and it doesn't matter about the size of the part. You know, if you've got one scene or you're in every scene, it doesn't matter. If the writing's good, if the story's good, if it's a character you can live with and inhabit and feel good about, then your quid's in.
Do you like to be scared when something's offered to you and you
sometimes I'm not as fearless as I encourage other actors to be.
Right.
You know, I talk a great game when, you know, with young actors. I'll say, you know, you've got to be fearless.
Yeah.
You know, if it scares you, that's good. That's a good feeling. You know, you'll be on top. You'll be on your toes. But I find myself kind of every now and again. I kind of go, yeah. I had a conversation with Kelly Cal, who I've partnered on a couple of films as an executive producer, and Kelly and I get on because we have a very similar kind of view about these things. You know, it's more to do with a practical approach to the craft of what we do. And you know, I said I've reached a point now where no one's going to pay good money to see me doing all the running and jumping, but they might pay good money to see me doing all the pointing and shouting. You know what I mean? So you know, so you got some great young actor, you know, who does the running, jumps out of the car, does his own stunts, you know, and I'll be the guy behind the desk, kind of going, "Get out there and get that guy." You know, I'm that guy, you know, or on the phone, you know, we're on. Do it. Boom, put the phone down. Or I'm behind a big desk and I'll say, 30 years, no parole. You know, I'll be that guy.
Let's imagine you had all the money in the world. You had a financier who would fund anything that you wanted to do, let you be the director, executive producer, creative choice maker. What stories resonate with you and you think, oh, I'd love to go...
Immigrant stories.
Immigrant stories.
Stories about the courage and the daring and the fearlessness and the recklessness that it takes to leave everything you know, everyone you know, and to try and create a life in a place where you have no connection and where the only thing that's pulling you there is either some kind of salvation, be it political, cultural, moral, economic, you know, maybe you're making this journey because your life's in danger. Maybe you're making this journey to save your children from a fate worse than death. Maybe you're just trying to make a better life for yourself. Those stories are, to me, are at the root of every kind of human experience. The moment when we decide to go from A to B in whatever context, the moment we decide to release ourselves from those chains, those connections, those bonds that keep us somewhere. That journey is, I find, deeply moving and so human
and so powerful. Well, Alfred, we end the chat with a couple of questions. I don't know if you know this.
No, what?
Not that we haven't been having questions for the last hour or so, but the same questions. And the first question is, if you could take a road trip across America, and you were going to, let's say you were going to drive to New York right now, and you could take anybody in the car, 3 people in the car with you from here to New York driving, from any time in history.
Oh, wow.
Who would you take with you in the car?
On the road trip?
Yeah.
Whoa.
And you don't have to drive, by the way. You could have somebody else drive.
From any time?
Any time in history. We've had very interesting carfuls.
I'd William Shakespeare.
Wow. Nobody has ever said that. Okay.
William Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Because I'd love to know all about what theatre was like in his day. I'd love, and I know what my first question would be.
What would it be?
Would be, what was the very first performance of Hamlet like? What happened? The very first time Hamlet was ever performed. Were you nervous?
Yeah. Did you think it was going to go down well?
Yeah. Definitely William Shakespeare.
Great.
Jimi Hendrix.
Wow.
Jimmy,
Yep.
Bring your guitar.
Yep.
Bill, bring a quill. Who else? One more person? Can I be really cheesy?
Yeah.
I think the other person would be Meryl Streep. Because I'd love to know how she does it.
Is she, in your opinion, the most extraordinary actor on the planet?
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. Male or female. Without a doubt.
In the history of filmmaking?
Certainly in the history of filmmaking. I mean, you look at she's one of those actors. Well, she's unique actually, because there isn't anyone like her. Because you look at her work, you look at her body of work. Talk about range. I mean, she makes the rest of us look like we're kind of just, dilettantes. I mean, she's taken herself to places and taken us to places, in her work. And you look at all the way through her life, all the way through her career, from a young actress right to what she's doing on HBO now with her series. I mean, there's a life you can almost learn how to be. If you looked at all her movies from the beginning right to the end, it's as if you can learn how to be a human being just from
watching those
looking
films.
at her work.
That's going to be an interesting ride. Who's driving out of the 4 of you, by the way?
Oh, I kind of imagined I'd be driving.
Well, I wouldn't let William Shakespeare drive because...
Well, I'm not sure I'd let Jimmy drive.
No, I wouldn't let him drive either. So it's between you and Meryl, I think.
Yeah. Well, whatever she wants to do, whatever Miss Streep wants to do is fine.
She's
with
in
me.
charge.
Yeah, totally in charge. And
Right.
I'm in the back
With Jimmy.
And
he's sort of
smoking a joint. And just every now and again
I wonder
kind
if
of go,
William would take it.
wow.
I wonder if you offered him a toke if he'd William
I don't know what-
Shakespeare.
Yeah, I'm sure. If he might say something like, forsooth, is this like tobacco?
Take then thy joint and smoke it and toke it. And then your last day on earth.
Oh, I would gather all my family
Mm-hmm.
and all my friends, all the people that I love and who hopefully love me. I'd gather them all together around a big table and we'd have a big fuck-off spaghetti dinner.
Big fuck off spaghetti dinner.
Yeah. And we would just eat and talk and tell jokes and stories and have lots of wine, and then at some point I would just make my excuses and
drift away.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah,
you guys carry on.
Carry on with the good work.
I'll be back in a few. I'll see you in a few.
Well, I know we're going to see you in a lot more movies, and I'm excited to see what you're going to do with being a director. When do we expect that? How long?
Well, we're looking forward to, I think we're hoping to start shooting in the fall.
Awesome.
So
really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Phil. This is great fun.
Yeah, really good. Scott, were we rolling? Okay, good.
Yeah. You'll be able to dig the bones out of that.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. To see more great interviews, go to philkeoghan.com and subscribe to BUCKiT with Phil Keoghan wherever you get your podcasts. Please consider rating and reviewing us. And follow BUCKiT, that's BUCKiT with an IT, on Instagram and Facebook. Also, follow me on Twitter, @Phil Keoghan. Today's podcast proudly brought to you by BUCKiT Nutrition. Great tasting, high-performance nutrition to power your adventure. Don't forget to go to Amazon.com, search for BUCKiT Nutrition, and use promo code BUCKIT10, that's BUCKiT with an IT, and you'll get a 10% discount on all BUCKiT nutritional products. Just wait until you try the BUCKiT Booster with Manuka Honey.